Thank you, Yvonne, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning in the first of the Authorities Webinar Series. Yvonne has made the introductions and has gone through the running order for today, so I won't repeat any of that. And I can see from the attendance list that a lot of you are already INAB clients or perhaps assessors working for us. But perhaps for those of you who aren't as familiar with INAB, as Yvonne has said, we're the national accreditation body and we've been providing accreditation in Ireland now since 1985. We have 230 clients accredited and they're providing accredited services for testing, medical examination in the area of certification, food quality assurance and inspection services. So a broad remit of clients that are accredited by INAB. So to move on to our discussions today in relation to Brexit and the implications for accreditation. This is the overview of the content that I'm going to discuss today. So I'll start very briefly with what we know now, and Yvonne has already covered some of that in her introduction. I'll then move on to setting the scene and painting a picture of accreditation both within Europe and worldwide. And I guess that's very important just to provide some context with regard to the continued acceptance and recognition of accreditation following Brexit. I'll then move on to discussing some particular pieces of regulation, legislation, and the impact that accreditation and changes to accreditation might have therein. I'll then discuss some implications for INAB accredited clients as they prepare for Brexit and in order to continue to meet accreditation requirements. Finally then, I'll just take you through some implications for INAB itself and how we've been adapting and adjusting in our preparations for Brexit and our support to businesses. The last couple of slides will just direct you to some useful resources and further links to take away after this session. So, as I said very briefly, what do we know? So, we have the UK decision to leave the European Union, and we are well into the transition period now, which concludes on the 31st of December of this year. So the clock is well and truly ticking, and that will give effect fully to the exit of the UK from the European Union. We know that the Northern Ireland Protocol exists, and we know that it exists either with a trade deal or without a trade deal. We also know that there's a huge amount of support and advice and information available from government in order to help businesses around the country to get Brexit ready. And we also know that the European Commission has also published a large amount of information and detail in their Commission notices about getting Brexit ready. The reason that I just wanted to set this scene, I guess, is just to focus on the two key dates and the two key pieces of information with regards to accreditation. That is what will happen on the 1st of January 2021 and the provisions for accreditation under the Northern Ireland Protocol. So I hope to take you through some examples with regard to that. So before I get into that detail, I guess it's necessary to paint a picture of accreditation in Europe and indeed worldwide. As you may know, most countries around the world have a national accreditation body, and these accreditation bodies are organised into regional associations, more or less along geographical locations. So there is, for example, the Asia Pacific region, there's the Inter-America region, there's the South African region. And these regional associations come together to form the worldwide associations of accreditation bodies. We have ILAC, which is responsible for the accreditation of laboratories, calibration testing laboratories, medical examination laboratories and inspection bodies, and IAF, which is the Association for Accredited Certification. So within these regions and between these regions, there exists what's known as multilateral agreements. And these are agreements between accreditation bodies, which means that we recognise and accept the certificates issued by those accreditation bodies that are signatory to these multilateral agreements. And these agreements are of critical importance in terms of facilitating trade in goods and services, and it underpins the principle that goods and services and products should be tested or inspected or certified once, and they're accepted everywhere, once they're issued by bodies that are accredited to these signatory agreements. Within Europe, some of you, and I'm sure a lot of you, are familiar with EA, which is the Association of Accreditation Bodies, and that is the European Regional Association. Europe itself has gone one step further with regards to accreditation, and back in 2008, Regulation 765 was introduced, and it provided a legal framework for accreditation within Europe. It sets out a number of key principles for the operation of accreditation in the European region, but one of the key ones is that each member state shall have only one national accreditation body. And INAB is the accreditation body for Ireland, and our friends in the UK, UCAS, are the national accreditation body for the UK. And both of us are EA members and signatory to the EA multilateral agreements. EA itself is not a regulatory organisation, but it does work extremely closely with the European Commission, and the importance and growth of accreditation underpinning European legislation has increased exponentially in the past 10 or 12 years or so since that regulation was introduced. EA have very helpfully pulled together a whole suite of information on the legislation, the European legislation that mandates accreditation, and I've provided a link here for your convenience. So what changes from the 1st of January 2021? UCAS is no longer considered the accreditation body as defined in that European regulation which I referenced. And the definition of an accreditation body in that regulation is, and I've transcribed it here, it shall mean the sole body in a member state that performs accreditation. So clearly from the 1st of January, UCAS no longer meets the requirements of that definition under that regulation. It's important to point out that as a result of that, it no longer meets the membership criteria of EA. But through a provision in the Articles of Association of EA, UCAS were voted to continue a member to 2022, and further work will be undertaken within EA with the expectation that UCAS can continue to be a member of the regional group. It's also very important to realise that UCAS continues to be a member of ILAC and IAF and enjoys all the benefits that multilateral agreements provide, as I've illustrated earlier. EA have issued a statement on Brexit and the impact of Brexit for EA, and that's available on their website, and again I've provided a link for that. So trying to pull that together, those pieces of information together, it can be very difficult to understand. But I suppose the important part is to try and view it perhaps in two streams. And if we look at the regulatory stream, during the transition period, which is taking us up to the 31st of December of this year, UCAS accreditation continues to be recognised. At the end of the transition period, and from the 1st of January 2021, the European Commission will no longer recognise UCAS certificates where European legislation requires conformity assessment to be awarded by the national accreditation body of a member state. The second stream is equally important, and it's the multilateral agreements and what underpins the multilateral agreements. As I've already said, our friends in the UK, UCAS, continue to be a member of EA, ILAC and IAF. And the multilateral agreement itself is the agreement between the members that we recognise and accept the equivalence of the accreditation systems, and therefore the reliability of the results and certificates can be accepted by fellow accreditation bodies and those that are relying on the accredited results. So it's quite a difficult concept to understand, but I guess the key message from today is that we have to understand the origins of where accreditation is required and where the accreditation is mandated to be able to understand and recognise where UCAS certificates will continue to be accepted. So having set that scene with regard to the structure of accreditation and how it's set out worldwide and within Europe, I thought I would go through some regulated sectors and pull out particular requirements for accreditation and what will change from the 1st of January and also what will change with regards to the Northern Ireland Protocol. I'm going to deal with notified bodies, some environmental legislation on greenhouse gas emissions and EMAS verifiers. in the food area of official controls and organic produce. And at the end, I'm just going to include a slide on good laboratory practice. While it isn't an accreditation function, INAB is the National GLP Monitoring Authority for Ireland, so I thought I would include it for completeness. It's very important to emphasise again that there are a whole series of European Commission preparedness notices around all aspects of legislation, and these are available on the European Commission website. It's also important, I guess, just to state that INAB itself is not a regulator, so we don't enforce any of these regulations or pieces of legislation. But obviously, because accreditation is such a core component, we do work very closely with our national authorities through the implementation and where we can assist with this implementation of the legislation nationally. So if I start with notified bodies and just a very high-level schematic, perhaps for those of you who are not familiar with what notified bodies do, a manufacturer or an economic operator wants to place a product on the European market, they have to undertake a conformity assessment procedure, and that will assess the product for conformity to various health and safety requirements. And in order to place that on the European market and affix the CE mark, the manufacturer must get this product assessed for conformity. Now, they can either do that themselves, in certain cases they can self-declare, but in other cases where the services of a third-party organisation is required, they will engage the services of a notified body. And this notified body will undertake the conformity assessment of the product. The type of products that I'm speaking about are, industrial products, PPE, machinery, transportable pressure equipment, medical devices, construction products. It is widely accepted now at this stage that notified bodies are by and large accredited, and of course in Ireland that means INAB accreditation. Following accreditation, the notified body is then officially appointed by the member state, and their details are entered on the NANDO database, the European Commission database. So from the 1st of January 2021, UK notified bodies will lose their status as an EU notified body. And by consequence, the UCAS accreditation of these notified bodies is no longer recognised. So what does that mean in practice? Economic operators must now use an EU27 notified body in order to affix the CE mark and to place the product on the European market. It's vitally important at this stage that if you haven't already done so, economic operators must source another EU27 notified body and transfer their technical information to that EU27 notified body. There is a Commission notice on this, and it was recently revised and reissued in March of 2020. The good news is that there's a very large database of EU notified bodies that are, it's a free market service that notified bodies provide, and they're free to operate in any country throughout the European Union. The database itself is very accessible and can be searched by country or by product legislation, so it is very easy to source a new notified body if you need one. The further good news is that there are now 17 notified bodies established in Ireland and accredited by INAB. Their details and their full scope of the services that they provide are available on our website, but we are covering industrial products such as PPE, construction products, machinery, transportable pressure equipment, EMC, etc. So there is local choice available in INAB should you need the services of a notified body. The Northern Ireland Protocol, as has already been mentioned, provides for certain provisions of European law to be applicable to the United Kingdom in respect of Northern Ireland, and specifically in relation to product conformity. The protocol and the information notices arising from that do provide for conformity assessment bodies that are established in Northern Ireland to certify products. They will be able to affix a UK NI mark, and the products and the certifications are valid in the Northern Ireland market, but not the EU. It does provide for accreditation also of these conformity assessment bodies. And as I said, the notice updating this is available from March 2020 of this year. We have recently also been made aware of a UK conformity assessment scheme. I did mention earlier that UK notified bodies will lose their status as an EU notified body, but they will assume the status of a UK approved body and their UCAS accreditation will continue. They will be able to certify products to place on the UK market and affix a UK conformity assessment scheme. The information on this is still relatively new, so this situation no doubt will evolve over the coming weeks and months. As Yvonne mentioned, my colleagues Alan and Alice will discuss in more detail information in relation to industrial products and transportable pressure equipment at our webinar on the 7th of October. Moving on into the environmental area, the EMAS regulation, the Eco Audit and Management Scheme, again provides for accredited verifiers under the Articles 20 and 21. And from the 1st of January 2021, the UCAS accredited verifiers shall lose their status because they have to be accredited by the National Accreditation Body of the member state. EMAS registrations will also be affected. Again, there's a Commission notice on this issued again in July 2020, but it doesn't make any reference to the Northern Ireland Protocol at this stage. But it's important to keep an eye on these notices because they are continually updated. In the environmental area again, the emission trading scheme for greenhouse gas emissions is a very important piece of legislation. As and from the 1st of January 2021, verifiers accredited by the accreditation body in the United Kingdom cannot draw up verification reports. So certainly some industry in Ireland would have relied on the services of UK-based greenhouse gas verifiers. But they would have to relocate to a member state within the European Union in order to continue to provide that services. Again, there's a Commission notice on this in July 2020, and it does make reference to the Northern Ireland Protocol and to accreditation. In the food sector, two important pieces of legislation with regard to the official controls. And this is with regard to laboratories that are designated by the member state and accredited by the National Accreditation Body of the member state to provide testing of foods for the purposes of official controls. It appears at this stage that UCAS accredited laboratories will no longer be accepted, and certainly some of our own laboratories might have relied on the services of UK laboratories, perhaps for some subcontracting activity. There hasn't been a Commission notice issued as yet, but again, it's important to keep an eye on the Commission website for this. Additionally, organic produce and the certification of food as being organic under the provisions of two regulations from 2007 and a more recent one from 2018. Again, it provides for official control bodies who will certify produce as organic. And these will be accredited and approved by the National Competent Authority. Again, there's a Commission notice on this from March in 2020, and it does discuss the validity of the UK official control certificates for import purposes. So it's important to check the validity of those certificates if you're operating in that business area. And finally, I just mentioned good laboratory practice. As I said, INAB is the National Monitoring Authority for GLP, and this programme deals with the preclinical studies on chemicals and pesticides that are required to be submitted to receiving authorities. They have to be conducted in accordance with GLP principles. We currently have two facilities in our programme, and our colleagues in the UK, the MHRA, are the UK Monitoring Authority. I guess there's kind of a twin track system here. There is European legislation underpinning GLP within the European region, and under that system, the acceptance of data can no longer be applied to the UK. However, the UK is a signatory to the OECD mutual acceptance of data, so the information can continue to be relied upon under that system. There's a Commission notice which again has been revised in June 2020, and it has been updated for the Northern Ireland Protocol, providing for GLP studies that are performed in Northern Ireland. So that has taken us through, I guess, a sample of legislation where accreditation is required. It's by no means exhaustive. As I mentioned earlier, EA have compiled a list of some 100 pieces of legislation where accreditation is mentioned. There are new regulations coming down the track, and it's important to be aware of those with regard to implications arising from Brexit from the 1st of January. For example, the cybersecurity regulation, the general data protection regulation are two important pieces of regulations that will require accredited certification in due course. So I thought I'd just move on and just give some thoughts on possible implications for our INAB accredited clients. And really just to prompt some thinking to help you prepare for your business and offer some solutions from my perspective. For those of you in the audience who are clients, you might recall we did a survey back in 2019 on where at that stage you might have identified some potential impacts. If I haven't covered everything, you feel free to raise them in the question and answer session, and we'll certainly respond to you on those in due course. So I guess the first one is around supply chains, and there's been a lot of information and advice provided with regard to analysing and assessing and understanding your supply chains from point to point. But specifically in relation to accredited clients and the requirements under accreditation that need to continue to be met, some of the things that we might need to think about with regard to the continued access of consumables. For those of you who are working in laboratories, is the security of proficiency testing assured, or access to inter-laboratory comparisons? Will the access to calibration, maintenance, or other technical services continue? Are there going to be possible increased costs or delays? For those of you manufacturing, distribution of products, the routes to distributed products, have you looked closely at those and assessed any potential impacts from Brexit? Access to subcontractors. I guess a lot of our accredited clients would rely on UK-based subcontractors, and will that access continue into the future? And indeed, are there any customs considerations to consider if you're bringing in, for example, proficiency testing material or sending material across to subcontract organisations? I'm not suggesting that there are any problems in these areas, but I think it is important that you ask yourself the questions and to make sure that you are fully prepared for the 1st of January 2021. You'll also be aware that some of our clients have UK sites that fall under their INAB scope of accreditation. They may have decided to open a second site in the UK or a branch in the UK to provide INAB accredited services. And of course, this is perfectly acceptable under accreditation rules, and it will continue to be acceptable. So I certainly do want to reassure any clients that are operating in the UK that we will continue to provide their accreditation. And we do expect that INAB accreditation certificates will continue to be recognised in the UK under the multilateral agreement system that I mentioned earlier. Some possible solutions that I can offer at this stage. For supply chains, as we said, and as the advice has been telling us, analyse your supply chains, your distribution routes to ensure that you have continuity of supply and access to services. If you need a proficiency testing provider, could you investigate an alternative provider? There is a European database, eptis.com, which offers a full list and span of proficiency test providers for a whole suite of testing. INAB itself, of course, can accredit proficiency testing providers and reference material producers. Is there an opportunity to have that service provided for in Ireland and accredited by INAB? Is there an INAB accredited calibration supplier that you can consider using? We have 18 calibration laboratories accredited by INAB, so there is plenty of scope there to provide that service. And indeed, if you are an accredited organisation already, would you consider expanding your accredited scope, perhaps to repatriate some of this testing, some of the services that might be currently being sent to the UK? And we're certainly ready and available to provide that extension to your accreditation if you think it's worthwhile. And finally, some implications for INAB. Since Brexit, the decision back in 2016, INAB itself has been adapting and responding in preparation for Brexit, both in terms of our own activity and also in terms of the support and advice that we're providing to businesses and to government. So we have, in recent times, expanded our accreditation programme. As I mentioned previously, we now have 17 notified bodies accredited. Prior to this, we would have had around 4, so it has been quite a significant increase for us over the past number of years. We've also become active again in the greenhouse gas emissions trading scheme and accreditation of verifiers. And similarly, we've become active again in the certification of persons. Prior to the decision on Brexit, we actually had no certification bodies accredited in this area, and now we have 5. As I mentioned previously, we're willing to expand our accreditation programme where the demand is. We're ready to provide accreditation for proficiency testing providers. We already provide accreditation to reference material producers, and we have 2 already accredited, but we're there to add to that programme if needed. And to repeat, we are here to provide accreditation to extend your scope into new business opportunities. We have been asked, with regard to our UK assessors, as you know, we do use UK-based assessors to deliver our accreditation programme, and we work very closely with them, and they provide a valuable service to INAB. We don't see any reason why we can't continue to use them, and we're happy to continue to use them. And I suppose for ourselves, our terms and conditions and contracts with those assessors are very much grounded in Irish and European legislation. We do, of course, welcome any Irish assessors that might decide they want to work with INAB, and we're always open to expanding our assessor pool. But for the moment, we don't see any difficulty with continuing to use our UK assessors. INAB, of course, will continue to provide clarity and conformity assessment as the situation evolves over the next few weeks and coming months. And that's clarity both in terms of the Brexit-related queries that come in directly to INAB itself, but also to various national authorities and government that we work closely with in delivering the accreditation service. We will continue to promote the benefits of INAB accreditation and the importance of INAB accreditation. And we have recently actually renewed the registration of our accreditation logo and symbol within the UK as trademark protected symbol. And we have been supported by the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation in terms of new staff to be able to meet the demands and respond to demands that Brexit brings to INAB. So that has really brought me to the end of my presentation. My last few slides, as I said, to provide some useful resources and further reading to cover some of the areas that I've touched on today. And also to remind you about our webinar series that Yvonne has already mentioned on the 7th and the 15th of October, and encourage you to register for those if you haven't already done so. So thank you very much for joining me this morning, and I'll hand back to Yvonne, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as best I can. Thank you.